Sons and Lovers is a 1913 novel by the English writer D.H.Lawrence. It traces emotional conflicts through the protagonist, Paul Morel, and his suffocating relationships with a demanding mother and two very different lovers, which exert complex influences on the development of his manhood. While the novel initially received a lukewarm critical reception, along with allegations of obscenity, it is today regarded as a masterpiece by many critics and is often regarded as Lawrence's finest achievement. It tells us more about Lawrence's life and his phases, as his first was when he lost his mother in 1910, to whom he was particularly attached. And it was from then that he met Frieda Richthofen, and around this time that he began conceiving his two other great novels, The Rainbow and Women in Love, which had more sexual emphasis and maturity. The novel opens with the description of settings. Gertrude Morel was pregnant with her third and unwanted child. While she was sleeping, Walter cut off his eldest son's hair like a shorn sheep. They both have an argument over this. Later her husband comes home drunk, and they fight, leading to locking Gertrude out of the house. A flashback scene also occurs, and Gertrude remembers how she and Walter met at a Christmas party, and she loved him not knowing that he was lying about himself. They both get married, and eventually, Gertrude gets to know about the betrayal of her husband and his poverty. They often have argued over his alcoholic nature. The novel progresses with the birth of Paul, an unwanted child. The parents keep on quarreling, and the father steals money from his wife's purse. The confrontation by the wife leads Walter to leave him, but he comes back home at night. Walter pays no attention to his family, and the environment of the house gets more tense. Gertrude gives birth to another child, Arthur, who has noticeable similarities with his father and receives more love from him by becoming his favorite child. When the eldest son, William, reaches the age of 19, the father suggested that he should be working as a miner, but the mother fights for the son and sends him to London for work. Paul and the family remain alienated from their father. Paul finds work at a surgical instruments company as a junior clerk. William in London starts dating a girl, Lily Weston, whose photograph he sends home. Gertrude doesn't like the girl. William suddenly falls ill and dies of a skin disease. This leads the mother into grief. She nurses her other son, Paul, to her fullest, when he catches pneumonia. Paul recovers from the disease. Paul and Gertrude develop a deep relationship with each other after the death of William. Paul starts liking a girl, Miriam, who took care of him while he was ill. She is an ambitious girl who tries to change a lot by educating herself. Gertrude dislikes Miriam because she thinks that she will take Paul away from her. Paul shares his feelings towards Miriam with her friend Clara, whom he starts seeing. Paul leaves Miriam when he decides to be more devoted to his mother, who is now an old woman. Paul then develops a strange relationship with Clara. He is not sure whether he is attracted or repelled by Clara. While in confusion, he still visits him and develops a relationship with her. Paul diverts most of his attention with Clara, and she tells him about her shattered married life. Paul's painting is sold to Major Moreton, and it makes his mother happy. She advises him that he should get married now. Paul patches up with Miriam and tells her that they could not survive the relationship because it didn't have sex in it. They both sleep with each other, but Miriam holds an opinion that she and Paul are too young for marriage. Paul walks out of her, and it makes both of them irritated with each other. Meanwhile, Paul's sister and younger brother get married. After breaking up with Miriam, Paul again finds solace with Clara and invites her to meet his mother on the seaside trip. Clara and Paul develop a passionate relationship. Paul happens to meet Clara's husband Baxter Dawes, with whom he fights and gets injured eventually. Paul finds himself perplexed and divided between his love for his mother and his passion towards other women. Gertrude Morel gets diagnosed with a tumor and suffers a lot. Paul and his sister give her an overdose of morphine to set her free from the pain. After the death of his mother, Paul finds his life shattered. He wants to finish his life for the sake of his mother, but he doesn't attempt this. Miriam proposes to him for marriage, but he doesn't accept the offer. Clara settles down the things between her and Baxter Dawes, and they live happily in Sheffield. Paul becomes a friend of Baxter and Walter, and he sells their house and starts living in rooms in the town. Paul chooses a single life for himself and discovers that he can love only with his mother. There is no place for another woman in his life. Beliefs surrounding sexuality in the Edwardian era were that upper-class women were to be modest and chaste while men had natural sexual desires. Lower-class women were considered to have sexual desires as well. A novel such as Sons and Lovers undermines this notion. Edwardian beliefs are represented by Gertrude Morell, who views any of the women who pursue her sons as immoral. However, the character of Clara Dawes, who is of the upper class, challenges the notion that upper-class women don't feel sexual desires. She is quite open and liberal with her sexuality. Her freedom in the novel was deemed obscene, granting Lawrence the reputation of being a crude and pornographic author. In 1900, Sigmund Freud, an Austrian psychoanalyst, published his famous book The Interpretation of Dreams, which explored the human subconscious and the repression of desires and included theories that linked human behavior to sexual desires. His most famous theory was the Oedipus complex. Sons and Lovers explores Oedipal relationships, but rather than the son having a sexual desire for the mother, we see Gertrude Morell projecting her attachments to her sons, William and Paul, while also jealously wishing to rid them of their female partners. The novel deals with the theme of bondage and free will. Gertrude gets married to Walter due to her free will. She remains in the bondage of an alcoholic husband and an unhappy life. Despite hating her relationship with her husband, she was unable to leave him. Then Gertrude develops this bondage for her sons. She influences every instance of their life. Her choice of disliking their lovers leaves her sons in a constant perplexing thought. Industrialization is another bondage in the characters' lives. Mrs. Morell was tired of the mining job of her husband. The mines were thought to be places of alive burying. She tries to save her sons from this occupation, but she puts them into other jobs. The writer comments about this industrialization that he was being taken into bondage. The characters are unable to find their free will for their love life. Paul loves Miriam, but he didn't dare to tell this to her, and he shares this with Clara. William, despite liking Lily, he couldn't have her in life because his mother doesn't like her. So the boys are so busy in pleasing their mother that they never get their love with other girls. The writer has chosen to portray the binary of social class in the novel. The first protagonist, Gertrude, has been a former teacher and from the family of professionals. She loathes her husband's laboring work and thinks of herself as a sophisticated woman. She hates the pit mining jobs and tries hard not to let her sons do this job. William's girlfriend from London thinks about the Morell family as they were clowns. William himself acts the way a non-laborer does in front of laborers. Sheer contrast of the two classes is painted with the help of the character of Thomas Jordan. He was the factory owner, and he uses his power when he fires Baxter and tries to make a bond with Paul. Set in Lawrence's native Nottinghamshire, Sons and Lovers is a highly autobiographical and compelling portrayal of childhood, adolescence and the clash of generations. This novel is not for everyone since it does require patience. The reward is an interesting study of human relationships, and a look at the workers in England at the turn of the century.